have themselves tested for a battery of over 80 toxic chemicals, and I think they were pretty stunned to find that all three of them were filled with toxic chemicals, as is every one of us. Canada's boreal forest, of course, is the last large intact forest left on the planet. We're poised to begin to attack it, although the federal government has promised to protect 50% of it. That means the other 50%, I guess, will be developed. And there are large tracts in the Amazon, in Papua New Guinea, and Congo. But if we continue the destruction of our forests at the rate we're going, in 20 years there won't be a large intact forest left on the planet. These are frightening threats to our future. These are being reported almost like a staccato of report after report after report. And yet, the astonishing thing to me is there seems to be little connection between what those reports tell us and our lives. There seems to be very little response to the seriousness of these threats. We have to realize that we are the biggest predator on the planet, and the top predators are always the most vulnerable to what happens to the web of life that's supporting them down below. I think that the challenge then must lie in the way that we perceive ourselves on this planet. Otherwise, why wouldn't we be jumping up and down with all of the signals that are coming at us? And a problem that I see is when a new technology comes in. You think of oil. When oil came in to replace coal and wood, you know, at first it was very, very hard to get the oil used widely. But once it became ubiquitous and widely used, then what you find is that you have to have a massive infrastructure to use that oil, from roads to garages, gas stations, hospitals, insurance, and so on. And now we have a huge vested interest in keeping that technology going, so that when one begins to say, whoa, maybe this isn't the route that we have to go, maybe we have to transform ourselves, then we're up against all of the vested interests that are now embedded in the fossil fuel industry, from exploration to getting the stuff out of the ground, refining, delivery, and use around the world. Let me say, just parenthetically, that we throw around the word sustainability a lot, sustainable energy future, and so on. And if that is what we are truly aiming for, then it seems to me very clear that fossil and nuclear fuels have to be out of that plan. They're non-renewable. So how can we have a non-renewable energy source as a part of a sustainable future? And not only that, by using them, nuclear and fossil fuels, we generate problems that we leave to future generations. Seems to me that if we really mean a sustainable future, then nuclear and fossil fuels have to be out, that our future is in renewables. And then the only legitimate question we ask is, when do we make the commitment to make the transition down that road? I spent all of July in Denmark, in Germany, in France, and Spain to do a film with my daughter. It's called The Suzuki Diaries. And the idea was, I'm this old guy, you know, at the end of my life, but the kids are saying, Dad, what lies ahead for us? Are there any options? Is there a future? Are there solutions? So we went to Europe to see whether there are, and let me say that this is going to be broadcast on a great time on a Sunday night, November 16th at 8 o'clock, and I know you're all going to watch and you're all going to tell your friends. It was absolutely uplifting to go to these countries and see what is being done. I visited as well Potsdam in Berlin. Potsdam Institute for Climate, 150 scientists working on climate change who've got a complete blueprint for getting Germany onto 100% renewable electricity 100% renewable, and indeed a plan, a blueprint for 100% renewable for all of Europe, which was absolutely thrilling. And these are not pie-in-the-sky things that depend on carbon sequestration and hydrogen fuel cells. These can be done now. This can be achieved now, which means that Al Gore's call for 100% renewable electricity in 10 years is the kind of call that we need to now address ourselves to the challenge. I believe that it can be done, and Europe shows the way to the beginning of that. But let me pause here and take time to reflect, because the 20th anniversary, it seems to me, is the obvious time for you to reflect back. And as I reflect back, I have to tell you, it's not pretty what we see. I suspect that many of you, at least the younger ones here, have no idea what led to the formation of the National Roundtable. Why would Brian Mulroney set up the National Roundtable? In the first term of office, he didn't indicate the environment was a priority for him. He did it, of course, because the public demanded it. In 1988, the environment was at the absolute top of the agenda, and we forget that. We forget that at our peril, I believe. And the roots of that concern in 1988 had been building for 25 years, and I can say that from personal experience. I spent 8 years in the United States getting an education that I couldn't get in Canada at that time. And when I came back home in 1962, man, I was hot. I was a geneticist. I knew about DNA and chromosomes, and I was going to make my mark in science. And that very year at the University of Alberta, I was completely sidetracked by a woman. Now, that's happened to me ever since puberty, but in this case, I've been ever grateful to her. As I was beginning my career in genetics, Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring. And Silent Spring was all about the unexpected effects of pesticides. And for me as a scientist, it was as if that book was written directly to me. For me, the message was, you scientists are clever. Yeah, you can make chemicals like DDT, but you forget that the lab is not the real world. And when you go out into the real world and apply your ideas taken from the lab, you find the real world is totally different, and everything is interconnected. So you spray to kill insects that are pests to farmers, and you end up affecting fish and birds and human beings. And for me as a scientist, that was a real shock. You see, I thought that when you're in the lab, I was a geneticist, I was studying fruit flies. We didn't give a damn about the fruit fly. We called them flying bags of chromosomes. We were only interested in using the fruit fly to study genes. But I thought that as we focused on a part of nature, that if enough of us looked at these bits and pieces of nature, we could piece them all back together and get a picture of the whole world. That's a reductionist approach that fuels most scientists today. Reduce nature to its smallest parts and then put them back together and reconstruct the whole. What Rachel Carson's message to me was, looking in the lab, you create a grotesque caricature of the real world. You know, you may have some soil that's been sterilized first, and then you have plants, and then a few insects, and then you spray in a growth chamber, and you find it kills insects and doesn't harm the plant. But that is a grotesque caricature of the real world. In the real world, first of all, you don't control the temperature and light and moisture and food. In the real world, you have a far more complex system, and you get all kinds of changes and fluctuations from day to night and over the seasons. And in the real world, everything is interconnected. And because of Rachel Carson, I could never just stay in the lab and do my thing. She was what sucked me and millions of other people into what we now recognize as a modern environmental movement. In 1962, I want to remind you, when Rachel Carson's book came out, there wasn't a single department or minister of the environment in any government on the planet. In 1962, the word environment simply didn't mean what we now understand it to be today. And we can all feel good about the fact that the environment has changed because we've come to understand it in a far more complex way. But because of Rachel Carson, her book, and her courage to go out and meet the people that were opposed to her, the environmental movement grew to encompass a worldwide movement. In only 10 years, in 1972, the first United Nations Conference on the Environment. Is Jim McNeil here? My bet is Jim was there as one of the main guys that was there. And that was the first